Go.
Hello and welcome to this Voynich Ninja web chat with Nick Pelling. Nick is the well-known author whose book Curse of the Voynich is very widely read and very well respected, if I do say so myself. He's also a well-known cipher enthusiast who blogs from his book ciphermysteries.com. Nick, welcome. How are you?
I'm just fine, thank you very much. Just fine.
Also joining me today is Cohen, who once again has not brought a webcam, so we're only going to be hearing his voice in the background. But hello, Cohen, and how's Belgium today?
Hello, David. Belgium is, as always, quite cloudy and a bit rainy, as is Britain, I guess. I'll get a webcam by our next interview, I promise.
I'm going to send you one by post.
All right.
Right, anyway, let's get straight in and start asking Nick a few questions about himself and about the Voynich. Nick, I'm going to start off with an easy one, actually. How did you first learn about the Voynich?
Oh, that's a computer game question. Many years ago, I was writing computer games. So I did that for 20 years. And I got a bit bored of it and I started writing a novel. And the novel had Knights Templars and Opus Dei, and all kinds of things that nobody had heard of back then, and which was quite fun. And then a friend of mine said, "Oh, Nick, you're into this history stuff. Can you check the backstory for my game?" This was Charles Cecil. He was writing the game for Broken Sword, and this backstory had all the usual string it together nonsense, pyramids, infinite power, Freemasons, all the boxes get tick, 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 tick. And one of the things he used was the Voynich manuscript. I thought, well, that's odd. I thought I knew all about different ciphers because I've always been interested. But I hadn't heard of the Voynich manuscript at that point. So I thought, I must have a look at it. So 6 months later, I kind of came back to it. I thought, well, let me have a look at it now. And I was hooked. Pretty much the first thing I thought was, here's somewhere, or here's something that can really benefit from clear thinking. I really want to do this. And I stopped writing because the Voynich was just too interesting. I couldn't compete.
How long ago is that, more or less?
That's about 2001.
Okay, and I imagine that you couldn't find too much online at that point.
No, there really was not at all. I ordered the copy flow from Voynich, and this big blue covered black and white thing that you could never quite read stuff on it. It was just always a little bit too hard to read, and but we made do. And the Voynich mailing list was actually very good back then, so that was a very good source of information and interesting people.
Yeah, but would you say that back in the day there was more of a feeling like everything is still up for us for grabs to discover? Like now the feeling is more like everything has been written already?
I disagree with any of that, really. Back then, the main feeling was one of a shared community. It really was quite small, quite compact, quite coherent. You had the two Jims, Jim Reed and Jim Gillogley, and Jacques Guy and René and Gabriel Landini, and a whole load of people who were all into it, who were all smart, and all basically not treading on each other's toes, not really fighting at all. It was just a different sort of vibe to what you have nowadays. And it was really great. It was really, really great.
I mean, I think we've got to a stage now where we've discovered everything that's easy to discover in the manuscript. So, and that's now down to a good old academic research in order to progress from now on. Would you sort of agree with that, or do you still think there's easy balls out there?
I think there's tons of stuff that really needs to be looked at, and really urgently. And people keep writing papers and assuming things that as if we know everything. We've made a lot of observations of scans, but we haven't really made all the scans we can. We haven't made all the types of analysis. For example, just looking at I think the last page, F116V, is the lowest hanging fruit of the whole manuscript because it's not in code, it's not in cipher, it's just a mess. Now, someone could very easily just take that to pieces in terms of work out what was being written there, what were the different layers, what was amended, and how it was constructed, a real forensic codicology job. And then at that point, we would have a whole load of really basic things that we could compare against other texts, other manuscripts, other languages. We'd have a language for that single page. We would say, this is written in this language, in this dialect, in this place, and then we could go to the archives and go, okay, let's have a look. Let's find all the other instances of this language in this place and broaden our minds. And all of a sudden, we'd have a very different kind of conversation about that single page. And that single page seems to me, because it's got Voynichese written on it, to have been written at the very time that the author was writing it, perhaps even by the author, him or herself. That's the biggest thing you want with anything, any kind of mystery. You want to get as close to the point of composition as you can.
Right, but you say so. What we are missing to be able to really get to the bottom of that is someone doing more studies on the physical manuscript itself.
Exactly. On that one page is a very good example of a non-cryptographic mystery. I don't think there's any doubt in my mind that it's not cryptographic, but it's just. I think what's happened to that page, and I've said this since the curse in 2006 and before, is that the manuscript, that single page, got fainter and fainter and fainter. And then someone came along, not realizing that in 400 years' time, we'd be able to enhance everything with computers. And they saw this faded page, and they say, let me try and fix it. And they've written over the top of it with their best guesses of what they can see. Unfortunately, it's ended up a mess. I would be entirely unsurprised if the person who was trying to fix it up didn't actually know the language of the document in the first place and was just making best guesses. So it's a multi-layered codicological mess. And yet people continue to write papers on it, billy goat livers and all the rest of it. And that's great. I mean, it's lovely that they feel involved and want to try it, but they just are skipping the difficult bit, which is how do you physically read it? Not how to interpret it, but how do you physically read it in the first place? And just having good, nice, high-resolution scans from the Voynich is partially enabling, but in this particular case, it's just not quite good enough.
Yeah, because if you look at it on the surface and you compare it to marginalia in other manuscripts, it's still really difficult. I mean, if I look at marginalia, I can kind of make out, even without knowing too much Latin, I can make out what's there. I can make out the language. Here, it's so much harder. We still can't agree on what language it could be in. So why would that be? Because
unlike the rest of the Voynich, I don't believe this is a cryptographic mystery on that one page. I believe that what we're looking at is stuff that's had layers of historical interpretation and emendation.
So you think someone messed it up, basically?
Yeah, with good spirit, good heart.
Yeah.
Trying to do their best.
Yeah.
But it's ended up messed up. But what codicology is all about is taking things that are hard to read and using physical imaging techniques to strip back the layers, to separate out the layers.
Right.
Yeah, with Raman scanning, you can say, okay, show me. You can scan the page and say, let's look at things with this particular element in.
Right.
That might be an element that was only present in ink from the 1600 onwards. So someone like carbon black, whatever. So anytime you see that, that is a later layer. Mm-hmm. Okay. At the same time, you can have what's called glancing illumination, where you can cast a light very close to the surface, really, really close to it. And so that you can see the indentations. You can't see the colours, you can see the indentations going into it, where the strokes were made. On a really microscopic level, that shows you what was physically written. And
right,
so you can do that and you say, well, okay, let me look at the width of the strokes. And you can say, well, okay, that stroke is 0.35 millimeters wide, and it's downstroke. So that's not the same as that one next to it. So you can reconstruct the layers of contributions that kind of make up the page. And at that point, okay, then we can start talking about billy goat livers and all the rest of it, all the wonderful things that people have suggested. But until that point, it's just all premature, which is a shame. So I think there are plenty of things that we know we don't know that we really should be looking at. But I don't know, there's simply an assumption that we know everything, and that's wrong.
Yeah.
I mean, we've been talking about the Marginelli, especially the last page, quite a bit on the forums, and there seems to be consensus from different researchers that it's Middle High German of some sort. There's been a few words that have come in and out of that. You've said before that you think you can read a name Simon in it. Do you still think that?
Don't see why not. The top line has sections that seem unmessed around with, and who knows?
I mean, the previous page, F16R, you mentioned in the past that you suspect it contains a colophon from the author.
That's right.
Why
yes.
do you think that?
If you look at all the preceding pages in Quire 20, what you see is lots of short starred paragraphs of a certain kind of rhythmic format. Da 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 da. Next one. Da 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 da. Next one. Fast forward to 116R, and you have this end paragraph. And we know this is the end because the following page is blank. That's the following page. But if you go to the previous page, you can see that one. That's 114.
Wait.
I think they're out of order in your sequence there.
Yeah, I do. I should have fixed it.
If you look at that final paragraph, it's
This
got
one,
a nice big gap, a nice ornate gallows at the top, and
Right.
a very awkward-looking first word, very artificial-looking first word, and then a whole bunch of text which doesn't look at all like the kind of text that other pages, preceding pages in the same quire have. And it's the very last thing that's written. Well, that's normally where you put colophons. You know, that's written this 21st day of March, 1457, by John Smith.
Mm-hmm.
God willing.
So and this is where you think the author's name would be in? Or?
Yes, I do.
It's the first I hear about that, so it's quite interesting. I had never studied this before.
I don't think it's any use to us.
Yeah.
But I'm saying if you try, if you're trying to, for example, understand Quire 20, I think that perhaps you should not use that last paragraph as the kind of thing you're looking for.
Right. It's
So
separate.
we can, even if we can't read individual words, we still should be smart enough to read the flow of the document as a whole and just work out what the bigger picture is. Mm-hmm. Kind of a top-down view of it.
I mean, talking about that, have you made any progress on your block theory paradigm?
Block paradigm.
Maybe you could just outline that for us.
So what is it to begin with? Because maybe some listeners don't know what we're talking about.
Okay, in code breaking generally, there are two types of attack. One where you try to attack the system that the cipher text is written in, and one where that's working backwards. But you can also do a forwards attack. If you're able to find what the plain text is, you can work forwards from there to the ciphertext. In the Second World War, this happened all the time. Messages were often sent through different channels. So you'd have an Enigma channel, plus maybe the Japanese ambassadorial channel. Okay? So the same message would kind of diverge in two paths. Now, you might not be able to break this one, but you might be able to break this one. And if you can break this one, you have a different way of attacking the other one. Mm-hmm. Say, I have the plain text for this one, so I can actually work out the settings and all the different things working forwards. So that's kind of basically a forwards attack from a known plain text. Now, in the case of the Voynich, it is a bunch of different things. There's no reason thinking it's a single shopping list or something. It's not a giant shopping list. It's a bunch of different things. There's the herbal bit, the Vars bit, the Astro bit, Zodiac bit, all different bits. Mm-hmm. So, and it seems very likely that they've all come from different sources.
Yeah. Okay,
and I don't think that's kind of being too pessimistic or crazy. I think that's saying, well, it's a bunch of different things. You know, it's 200 plus pages of stuff, and there's the patterns change, the uses changes. It's not the same kind of thing through and through.
It's what we would expect from a manuscript like that.
Yeah. So we don't really have a chance of doing a known plain text unless we happen to find the Voynich manuscript in clear somewhere. which is unlikely to happen at this point.
No.
But at the same time, it may well be that if we identify particular documents that have particular structures of particular subjects, for example, there's a good chance, who knows, 50%, 60%, who can tell, that the last section is a set of recipes, a set of short things, little secret recipes. There are a whole load of these for doing, I don't know what, health type things or craft things or or magic things. Who can tell? There are not that many documents. So if we find a document with the same structure, then there's that. Then there's a good chance we might be able to use a known plain text attack. But that means identifying a block. And even if we can identify a paragraph or a page, that is enough to help us look at the Voynich text and go, how does that map to that? Even a single word would be enough. But a word is still very wobbly, very indistinct. But if you can go just upwards from a word, maybe a sentence or a paragraph, then you should have everything you need to understand the Voynich's writing system in every single detail, breaking forward.
Mm-hmm. And have you ever found something where you thought, this is my block, this is gonna be it?
Yes, I have. For a while, I was convinced that I was on the trail of a 15th century recipe book that was going to be the same as Quire 20, or most of it. And I pursued it. In the end, I don't believe that there is a good version of it. There are bits of it that are copied into other recipes, but I don't believe we have that. So that was a big strong attempt on my part.
Yeah.
Okay. But the importance of the block paradigm for me, which is essentially using the known plain text attack on just a small block, yeah, saying if this block is the same, that's enough for us to break it. Okay. The importance of it isn't that we found one yet. The importance is that it gives us a mechanism we can all agree on, I think, that will break the Voynich. Whatever its language, whatever its ciphering or otherwise, if we can identify the before and the after, we can map it, we can understand it.
Right.
So,
right.
And for me, the exciting thing about the block paradigm was that it was a way that I could suggest to people, this is how we can collectively break the Voynich. This is the way that we can collectively use research and agree to disagree on anything else. But if we can agree that if we find the source of a page and map that onto Voynich's text, then we can see how the two link together. And that's not how can I put it? And that for me is a revolution, because it says, in a way, it means that I can stop worrying about the cipher or the language or the text. I can and start worrying about how I can work with other people and sources to find the source of the blocks. And at that point, everyone can contribute, saying, "Well, how do these two things match?"
Yeah, I think I agree, because even if like the craziest, most unimaginable things have been done to the texts, we still have a chance of deciphering it.
Exactly.
Like that.
Exactly, yeah.
So you still think it's definitely some sort of ciphertext? It's not an exotic natural language? I
think we can rule out every single natural language thing. Every single one. There's a whole bunch of reasons for it. The language is inconsistent from section to section. It exhibits properties that no simple language, however exotic, would do. There is evidence of abbreviation that differs in different sections. Now, if you then start saying, well, okay, it's natural language, but it's abbreviated in some way. Now we're starting to talk in an interesting kind of conversation. But people kind of shut off because they tend to see natural language as an either-or thing. Either it's a Baxian pure natural language, or it's some other shite I'm not interested in. That kind of either-or is such weak thinking, such pathetically weak thinking, that we have to do better than that. personally, I'm at the stage where, even though I would say it's not a simple cipher, it's not a Trithenian cipher, I don't believe, and it's not an Albertian alphabetic cipher. I think we can get rid of all those three, and at the same time, we could also get rid of exotic languages. I think, and we can get rid of anagrams, random anagrams. So we can say exactly many things it's not, but at the same time, until we can start trying to figure out what's on the other side of the wall, in terms of the plain text, we're going to struggle. It's a combination of things, and that contribute in some kind of tangled and clever way to get to the end line. It's probably simpler than we think. These things always are, but they're just like one concepts.
Could it be gibberish or automatic writing?
No. There's two.
How will you prove that?
There's two structures. It's just there's someone could not sustain that. For example, I'll give you an example. Choir 30 and Choir 20. They use language in different ways. If you look at the starts of words, they're just different. And from other sections, and you go, okay, so maybe that was some other person doing it, or maybe that was something else. But no, I think there's direct evidence that the system used for Voynichese evolved over time, evolved during the writing of it, and changed. And that's what Courier called Courier A and Courier B, although you could extend that to about, 12 different sections because of the changes on the way.
But Courier also linked his A and B to two different hands. So if it's, for example, a transcription effort, it could be that they just transcribed in a different way, which does not imply an evolution over time.
I think that there's an interesting question to be had, but this is we're coming onto the zone of the questions that people haven't asked, and
right.
Since Courier put his paper in the 1970s, his papers plural, too many people have just sat back and well, okay, that's that, but actually that's just the starting point. And what annoys me is that even though we've got much better transcriptions than we had 40 years ago, 50 years ago, nobody seems to be trying to build on Courier. In fact, the person who's most cited Courier is Stephen Bax, and he cited him in order to diss him, to kind of like put him down. And I think, well, this is mad. This is madness. The one good piece of work we've got, and right. Bax starts by kind of putting it down. I think, well, no. We have to do better than that. We need to build on this stuff.
So what sort of statistical studies do you think can be done on the text? And actually talking about that, do you actually think the electronic transcriptions are any real value in carrying out this sort of thing, or should we be working with the original text?
I think transcriptions are hugely useful, hugely useful, and Eva is smarter than anybody really seems to understand. People seem to have forgotten the point of Eva, which was that before Eva, everybody had their own transcription. Everybody would say, oh yes, it's 4-0 whatever, and 8-9, or whatever their kind of particular thing was, and then someone would say, well, no, that's actually that's a strike through gallows. You should write it out like this, and they go, oh no, and people would fight over just the transcription for weeks. Eva stopped all that by saying, let's not try to transcribe what the characters are. Let's not decide. Let's postpone that. Let's just say what the shapes they are and put them into sequence, and let's just try to agree on that. However, people still haven't worked out what the shapes are.
Yeah, there's still an assumption when people are using those transcriptions that they think the Eva characters are the glyphs in the book, and that's written in stone. There's no attempt to think, well, actually, this Eva character may be composed of two glyphs in the book.
Yeah, there could still be parsing errors in Eva, which kind of influence the way we think about the characters.
There are plenty of those. For example, in Curse of the Voynich, I talked about the flourish on the end of the N character, Eva N.
Yeah.
Which end of dying. Everyone's favourite phrase, dying. I pointed out one page where the final strokes were written in a different ink.
Right.
That's like, hold on, if you kind of take a step back, well, hold on a second, how's that? Why would the final strokes be written in a different ink? And it made no sense to me at all. And then I thought, well, maybe they were added as a separate pass. So could it be that actually? Then I thought, well, I'll follow that through. If you follow the logic through to the end, you say, well, maybe what actually happened was that the way that whatever was enciphered on the page was originally a dot above the eyes of the Dain, and then because there's a medieval cipher where you would put dots in different positions to signify different characters. But maybe the end stroke was kind of brought down from that dot down to the bottom. Maybe in that specifically in Courier A, not in Courier B. Courier B is different. But maybe in A there was this kind of second fix-up stage where they said, you know what, dots as kind of a bit of a giveaway. Let's hide it more, and they kind of patched it up. So maybe there's this kind of like two-stage thing. Now, I suggest in 2006 that would be really, really good to try and use multispectral scans to examine that page and other pages. There's one in the pharma section, I think. That's the same thing. To try and really grasp what's going on there. Because if that's the case, there's something really funny about these end characters that we're not capturing in our transcription.
Right.
And if that's the case, then we're all over the place. Then we're looking at the wrong thing. And we have to kind of have our hands up and say, we've been caught out. Sorry, when we designed Eva, we got it wrong. And the other thing about Eva that's problematic is this issue of spaces and half spaces.
Yeah.
This is not going away. I mean, I know that Glenn Claston, my friend Glenn Claston, used to complain about the flourish on the SH, because there are whole loads of different flourishes.
Yeah.
And that's definitely a thing that perhaps should be captured in Eva. He captured it in his 101 transcription. Mm-hmm. But you put these together. Even with those things, Eva's still a very worthwhile thing. It's hugely worthwhile. But the problem, as David says, is that people just assume that we've nailed it and that's the last word. It's not the last word. It's an early word, but it hasn't really been backed up by the kind of low-level, detailed codological studies to try and work out if it actually matches what we see.
So it may be like David kind of implied that it might be worthwhile for some people to really return to the actual scans, to read the actual text, to get a feeling for it again, instead of just relying on a text file with the EVA transcription in it.
It's a really good exercise that anyone can do that costs nothing. Pick a page, any page, and transcribe it yourself.
Right.
Don't take anyone else's word for it. Just try it. Just try it.
And you'll soon run into trouble, probably.
Okay. Even if you try one paragraph from an A page, one paragraph from a B page, you'll kind of learn more about Eva and how it varies than most of the people talking about Eva. Mm-hmm. Anyone can talk about Eva. Everyone can go, yeah, quatid Eva, la la la. But actually trying to do the transcription, you'll kind of grasp what a task of epic proportions it was for Takahashi and for Glenn and others to put their transcriptions together. It's from what
was a lot of work.
I don't even want to think about it.
Yeah, exactly. And then people wouldn't even try to scan a single page. Just try and do a paragraph, and then start talking about Eva.
Yeah.
So it's a very, very, you'll get a very, very different outlook on it. Hugely different.
Right. Something else now. So your book, The Curse of the Voynich, was published over 10 years ago now, I think.
2006, yeah.
Yeah. So that's a whole while ago, and a lot has been discovered since then. Is there something which really changed your mind during that time? Something you really thought, okay, that was probably wrong. It must be this way.
Well, The Curse of the Voynich started out with a very simple premise. I've been reading about, I had started by saying, okay, can we date the Voynich manuscript? and everyone at this point, it's like in the 2000s, there were all manner of opinions, all manner, from like the 13th century to 20th century, and everything in between. And I thought, no, we had to do better than that. So I started trying to figure out a date. And before too long, I came to the conclusion that we had excellent reason to think it was not long before middle of the 15th century. So I started to think, well, okay, what do we know about codes and ciphers from the 15th century? You know, once you read Kahn and a bunch of others, you kind of exhausted what is a fairly small pool of work. You know, people don't think of the 15th century as anything particularly interesting. They say, oh, it's got nomenclatures and all the rest of it, but they don't really kind of engage with it in a huge way. It's not. I mean, because code breaking took off in the 16th century.
Yeah.
That's the war really began in Venice and elsewhere. So the 16th century is a real kicky part of the history where it goes bang, 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 bang. Let's start doing stuff. But the 15th century, they just kept on adding stuff, and nobody really knows about the other half of the equation, the kind of testing things and looking at things and how it was used and things. So I started looking at that, and one of the things I came up with was these secret books written by this architect, or described by this architect. He said, when I had some free time, I wrote these secret books, all with different subjects. And the more I thought about it, the more I thought, what if that's right? What if the Voynich manuscript is those secret books?
Mm-hmm.
You know, and it was like an itch I couldn't get out. So I basically read everything I could. I bought books in Italian, German, Spanish, French, all kinds of old stuff, all manner of books, and to get a real strong view on this architect's life. There wasn't a kind of an up-to-date biography of him, so I had to rely on fairly outdated stuff. But while I wrote the book, I came to say, well, where I ended up was, I can see how he could have done it. You know, it's not crazy. It's a sort of art history proof. It's not good enough. And what I found since I wrote the book was that he had written his own herbal, and nobody knew that. I discovered that.
Right.
When I talked to other filariety specialists, went, really? I didn't know that, but they did. So he had his own herbal, an elegant herbal written in the native tongue, in Tuscan, basically. So that's all we know about it. That's the long and short of it. And that's quite. That was very interesting to find. But I didn't prove the case. I exhausted all the archives I could, all the sources on him I could, and that's why there wasn't really a lot to say about it, because I did the work. I put the work in, and so it's not history kind of exploration of what it would mean if his secret books were the books mentioned in the Voynich. So I kind of haven't really got anything else to say about it.
Right.
The interesting thing about the book more generally is that what I was trying to do was look really carefully at the Voynich, and that's something that people haven't really done enough. They kind of tend to launch their boats into the sea, not really looking whether there's holes in it or not. They kind of just go, I'm rowing, and just hope they'll get to the other side before it sinks, but they never do. So the stuff that people want to read about in Curse of the Voynich is the stuff that isn't to do with filigree. It's the stuff to do with the page ordering and that kind of stuff, all which are, for me, the codicological basics,
right,
that give a foundation for what you're trying to do. And the tragedy for me is that in the decade plus since, nobody has done the basic bloody work. Looking, and there you are. If I had time, I would decamp to New Haven, and I would rent a flat there, and I would I would look at it every day, and I would scan it, and I would just do this kind of work. But maybe when I retire, and no one else has done it before then, maybe that's what I'll have to do to kind of purge this demon from my soul.
You could try a fundraiser.
Uh, I have a family.
Yeah.
I have mouths to feed.
Yeah. You mentioned 15th century ciphers. Have you discovered any cipher which might really illuminate what we're seeing in the Voynich, or?
There are lots of ciphers in from Milan. In Milan, there's a big cipher ledger, big thick thing full of all the ciphers. And every time a new cipher came in for the Sforza administration to communicate with some person, that would get added. It would get dated and added, and the cipher key written in. So it's a list of cipher keys. And from that, you can see that from about like 1470 onwards, people started using numbers, digits, Arabic digits, really a lot. So you'd have 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, whatever, and different numbers appear in ciphers a lot. But before that, there's some number-like symbols which aren't actually numbers that are used. For example, 4, 8, 9, very much as it's in the Voynich manuscript. So this fits, the Voynich manuscript fits with a pre-1470 cipher kind of pattern very nicely.
But their system is more like simple substitution, probably.
Exactly, they're all homophonic, always.
Yeah.
But that's not the point. The point is the choice of the symbols. That later on people were happy to do that. So it's kind of a funny old thing. So this is one of the reasons why I was comfortable with the 15th century dating generally, mid 15th century specifically. It kind of looks like other ciphers from 1440 to 1465, that kind of range. You can see them, they're all dated, so it's not hard to work out.
Right. But yeah, David?
Yeah, no, I was going to say, we haven't actually talked anything about the imagery. Obviously, your speciality is more on the text side.
That's all of it, really. History more than anything.
Yeah,
that's coming to dominate, I think.
Do you think the imagery in the book, obviously, we've talked often enough about how it fits in with other sort of herbals, but have you ever seen any indications that would the imagery would provide a way in for your block paradigm to be able to link that to any sort of manuscripts that are out there?
I've read Cohen's blog, and I can see what he's trying to do to tease out narrative threads, narrative stuff from different pages, particularly in Choir 13. But it's an interesting approach, and one that's fraught with peril, as you can understand. And I don't genuinely know. One thing about the Renaissance was that more generally the whole Renaissance was that it was a rebirth. It was believed to be a rebirth of old classical thinking and old classical techniques. They thought they were basically getting the best of the Greco-Roman world and bringing it to life, reborn. And so, in the works of Philaretic, for example, a lot of his thinking was strongly informed by Vitruvius and the whole Vitruvian approach to architecture. But only he thought he could make a more modern version and do his own thing. But he was also very interested in mythology, and there are lots of, in fact, his book on architecture is studded with all kinds of references to classical stuff, a lot of which was probably kind of drawn from his friend Filelfo, who was a Hellenophile, a Greek lover, and who'd into Byzantium, and all the rest of it, Byzantine Empire. So there are a lot of the people who were on the cutting edge of stuff in the Renaissance were fascinated by Greco-Roman mythology, absolutely fascinated. So it's not kind of hard to work out that it may well be that what we're looking at in Choir 13 is some kind of references to Ovid or whoever, but actually demonstrating that beyond doubt is quite a hard task. There's in the Curse of the Voynich, I looked specifically at the nymphs in Choir 13, and I came to the conclusion that I think to a large degree they're there to distract our eyes, that they're not the bearer of the meaning, except in a very kind of high-level symbolic. I think in a lot of cases they're just arrows, right. And that we are missing the point of the page. We're reading it at the wrong level. so that a lot of things we think we're doing are just category errors. And so it's very hard to be sure that we're not making some huge category error.
If you look at the nymphs in the roundels around the zodiac signs, if you talk about them in terms of meaning, each nymph doesn't really add much. I mean, they're all naked, so they missed a very important clue of clothing. And they're all basically in the same.
The clothing's mainly in the first few, isn't it? And then it's as though the author, the illustrator gets bored because I'm not doing that.
It looks rushed to me.
I've had enough of that.
They're all nude from now on.
Styles in bloody barrels. No more barrels for me. Thank you very much. I'm just doing naked women. That's as far as I'm going.
I mean, certainly with that Clive just mentioned, there's at least one folio where the imagery seems to be connected across all 4 pages of that folio. So you can see how the water goes down one page, it comes out the other side and goes down again.
That's right.
So it seems to link all of that into one large imagery, almost as if it was a wall poster, to be studied, not to be put into a book. Is that something you've ever seen when you've been looking at the book?
Are you talking about Choir 13, or?
I'm talking about Choir 13, how we've spoken before about how the water runs from one pool to another pool and then across to the other side of the page.
The post about that.
But you can only see that when you look at the actual folio as itself, not the actual pages in the book.
It's the point about one going from the recto to the verso opposite it to the facing page. That's a very, very strong indication that it should have been the central folio of the manuscript in its original page order. So I think we've got a nice example there. That's it. That's the one. Yeah, that's
the one.
I wrote about this in the curse as well.
Yeah.
There's no question in my mind that that should have been the central bifolio. The crease.
It really looks like it. Yeah.
I think if you follow that down, then you will see that the water pipe sort of vanishes halfway down the bottom right hand of the page, and then it reappears on the reverse of the page on the other side.
Yeah.
So it seems to be linking the reverse of the actual folio onto the verso side.
Yeah. So it could well have been the original. The interesting thing is that about the Voynich generally, the multi-folio pages when you've got these kind of super wide pages, this just doesn't happen in other documents. Yeah. And Dino Donovan bangs on about this, that it kind of proves something. I'm not quite sure what it proves, but it's an oddity that just existing manuscript history doesn't really help us with. I don't know. I think we just have to conclude that it's not what we think it is. There's something's going on there. We're not sure.
It ties into the very large fold-outs. That's also something we don't really know a parallel for it, because you've got these medical charts, for example, but that's really something different.
Yeah.
To see all these things tied into a book this way, I've never seen a parallel for it.
There isn't. As far as I know, there isn't.
And it doesn't help that they seem to be out of order.
Scroll and stuff, but this is not that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I think we have to sometimes just just conclude that some things we just don't know, and hopefully we will find out. But we have to kind of be sensible. We can't expect to solve everything. I think it gives us good reason to have an open mind when we go to the archives.
Mm-hmm.
But that's another subject we'll go into in a minute, I'm sure. I've seen the list. I've seen the page.
Yeah, he knows everything. We're gonna ask. He's been spying on us.
I was tempted to put in some really rude questions, but I thought that's it.
Was there a question in the list that you really wanted to answer that you?
No, they're all good questions. It's fine.
Because I don't think we've included all of them. So if there's one that you really want to talk about, it's your chance
to. Whatever you like. I'm not bothered.
Okay, David.
I don't know, I was going to ask you about your F57V nocturnal theory.
Yes, good.
Which you posted on your website earlier, because I always personally thought that they may have been representing the 4 winds. No real reason. Everyone's got to have a theory. That was my personal one. Your nocturnal one's certainly quite interesting. They all seem to fit into the same sort of idea. There's many different talks about it's a centerpiece of either a compass or an astrolabe or a nocturnal.
Yeah.
Do you have anything to expand on that?
It's a good old thing. Helmut Winkler suggested a Belgian book by a guy called Bernard, and I've ordered it, so it'll be with me in a week's time. So I shall update the blog when I've read it, and on the history. He's wrote a history of the Noctilade, which is what the French call Nocturnal, and I think there's a lot more to be found. I think one of the next steps, my next step, is to read his history of it, and then once I've got that, a broader picture of what's going on. I think, and then my plan is to start going to the actual manuscripts of the Noctilade, because there are a whole bunch of them. I listed them in the blog entry, to try and understand it. But the arms outstretched is a thing I've also been looking at, which is because that appears in Portuguese navigation manuscripts of the 15th century. There's a thing called Régimen del Norte, which it seems to be later, but this was definitely a thing from the mid 15th century to do with the guards. So there's maybe, I don't know, 3 or 4 weeks worth of work to do there just yet, which I'll blog about as it gets to it. So I'm fascinated because the repetitive cycle loop, the ring with the repetitive, where the 4x17, which is actually 4x18, is a very good example of, it's the second ring in, OLDR, whatever it is. It's a very good example of something that's not what you think it is.
Mm-hmm. Right. But we also get like characters here which don't really appear anywhere else.
That's right. Yes.
But what do you think about those?
Okay. The gallows, the big gallows, big elaborate gallows.
Yeah. For example.
I think that was originally just a downstroke,
Mm-hmm.
and then a kind of backwards fish type thing, and then the darker ink was added to make it turn the two into a gallows.
Right.
You can see it. I can't kind of annotate your page, but you can see the light brown on the left, the light white, and the darker brown in the middle. I believe those are different inks.
Yeah, I think it's quite clear the way I zoomed in on it 100 times. Yeah. Okay.
I think there were two, and if that was two things, then that's two questions. Well, why would you do that? And what was he trying to conceal? And I think what was to conceal was the 4x18 structure, which is 4 times 18 is 72, and that's 5 degrees.
Yeah, here you also get some weird transition in the ink, right?
That's right. It looks like he's gone over the kind of fish thing, but I believe it's under there.
Yeah.
Just as clear.
Okay. One question.
Also, there's a kind of a little vertical upside down V character in the sequence.
Here?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the one. But that's a very interesting one because actually the on F116V, the final page, the Pour le bon Simon Sint, whatever, the S's there, characters I think they're S's, are also that shape, which I think is odd one. Very strange. The top line, right at the top.
Where?
Left of the, it looks like some kind of upside down V. IMON. Pour le bon Simon. I think that's an S.
Mm-hmm.
Because there are similar sort of shapes, but that's a very, very distinctive S, which I haven't found in any paleographic reference books. But I think that there's something going on here. Something going on. Not sure.
Okay. One question two members wanted an answer to.
The point about that shape is that almost all the occurrences of that upside down shape in the manuscript are on F57V. They're all on that page, pretty much.
Right. But it is also exactly this page that I've seen people argue that doesn't really fit into the manuscript. It might be added later. For example, I've also noted that it's written on the back of a plant page, which is kind of out of, like, it could have been left blank, for example, that folio. Do you think that's possible?
Very often on the back pages of medieval manuscripts, you see pen trials.
Yeah.
Just quick brown fox, effectively. Nix fix, max fax, whatever's going on
Mm-hmm.
in their head. It just gets written down, doesn't matter. And so it looks a bit like a pen trial. It's hard to tell. That's often where you find stuff.
No, I mean I'm talking about the circular diagram. Where
Yes.
is it? That it also looks kind of out of place because of the different amount of circles, the different characters used. The human figures look kind of different than in the rest of the manuscript.
That's right, yeah.
So it's kind of the odd one out. Also, its reverse is a plant. So it looks like they could have added it on a piece that was left blank, perhaps.
It's entirely possible. There's a shape at the bottom right of the same page, kind of which
Yeah.
I interpret as being IIJ, with a bar across the top,
Mhm.
which is so IJ is that right? IJ, that's it. IJ, which is marks the start of book 2.
Yeah.
So that's the second. So this looks like an earlier layer than the choir numbers.
So the line on top of it would be 2 dots, or
There'll be a macron, just abbreviation.
right? Okay. Okay.
So this would match the following pages. This would be the start of the next stage, and it kind of goes from there into the Astro pages, I believe. So I believe that's the start of the second book of content.
Okay.
And so we have, if you accept that, then you have to accept that the pages in that last choir were folded slightly differently to how they've ended up. That's fine. That's kind of seems to be consistent with everything else. So
Yeah, definitely. Okay. So yeah, two people wanted to know about what you find the most significant advances in Voynich research in the recent years. If we are actually moving forward sometimes, or are we just really rehashing the same thing over and over?
For me, there's no question about it. The two big things that excited me most are all the calendars found by Marco Ponzi and the others,
Mm-hmm.
and the page from the French manuscript found by Elie Vlinska. I think that these are kind of really, really exciting, really interesting histories that reach out from what we're seeing on the page in the Voynich to stuff behind it. And these are really great finds, really, really great finds.
Mm-hmm.
Because what we need to be doing more than anything else, as I say, with the block paradigm, is finding where these plain texts came from.
Yeah.
If we can do that, we stand a chance. We really stand a chance. History and science and all of it can all work together to get to the end line. So, I've been looking through loads of manuscripts for German Volkskalender, and I think that there's loads more to find. There's loads more. I've got loads listed, but only a few are online. Probably maybe less than 10%, and which is frustrating. But there you go. That's normal. That's the normal situation.
Okay.
So I think that the problem is that you have all these talented, insightful people like Marco Ponzi and all the rest of them, and they're working away largely under the lights they can see.
Mm-hmm.
They're looking for their keys under the lamppost, the famous story, and the lamppost is the internet.
So are you implying that it will probably be solved by someone venturing into a real library and
Absolutely.
grabbing manuscript off the shelves?
No question about it.
Yeah.
There was if like let's put it this way. Think of the stats. Let's say 1 in 10 of these manuscripts is online. That's kind of a great overestimate. But let's say 1 in 10 is. Then we're only seeing the stuff from 10%.
Right.
What we need to be looking for, let's say in the Volkskalender or anything like these other manuscripts, is what we're looking for is the structure of the copying, the cladistics, the tree of copying,
Mm-hmm.
where they came from. And for example, in the Voynich, we see the Sagittarius crossbow.
Yeah.
And we only see that in a handful of drawings. But in the rest of the drawings, we all see lots and lots of circular zodiacs doing their circular zodiac thing, and, which is like very characteristic of this whole tree of manuscripts. But only a few of them have these zodiacs in, the kind of a zodiac crossbowman. Now, if it is the case that the zodiac crossbowman is distinctively from this sequence of manuscripts, then all we have to do, in theory, is go backwards from there and say, which manuscripts were these copied from? What was the sequence? And if we can identify that sequence, then we can start to say to manuscript. So say to libraries, okay, we're looking for manuscripts with this property. Can you look at the zodiac in this manuscript for me and tell me if it has these properties? And if it does, then we say, that's a candidate. So we can basically reduce our search by 90%. So when we go into the library, or say, can you send me a copy? We're not doing, and here's the money. There's always money. We're not kind of doing it blind. We're basically doing it in an informed and selective way, and we stand a chance. We can ask for every manuscript in every library to be digitized and sent to us just in case.
Don't you think that when selecting which manuscript to digitize, that they first will take the ones with illuminations and the prettiest ones, so that we have a much larger percentage of the illuminated manuscripts online compared to all manuscripts? Or do you think there are really still many zodiacs hidden in?
There are different policies. There are some manuscripts, some libraries who are digitizing all their manuscripts, earliest to latest, and just working their way through it. There are some who have preservation needs. That some manuscripts, in most need of preservation, get digitized.
Before they crumble.
So there's all kinds of reasons. You can't generalize, say this will always be the case. It's always different. Everything's different.
All right. Okay, David, anything else you wanted to ask?
No, I think that's been a fascinating chat. I think we've put forward all of the questions that occurred to us, and a few more aside. You happy over there, Cohen?
Yeah, I'm very happy.
You're always happy.
Yeah.
Well, Nick, it's been absolutely fascinating talking to you. Thank you so much for coming over and talking to us over here at Voynich Ninja. And I hope we're going to be seeing some more of you in the near future.
I think you probably will. But as you can probably guess, I have quite a lot of actual research to get through. So I do tend to prioritise my stuff into research first and chat second.
Yes, many more ideas than actual time to follow up on them, I think. That's good. All right.
Okay.
Okay, well, thanks very much, and until the next time, Nick.
Bye.
We're out.
Thank you.
Bye.